Hey everyone, it's your friend and colleague Jesse Green, and you're listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast. It's wonderful to have your company. Creating a successful practice is predicated on the idea that we create and keep customers. And in dental practice, that obviously means having patients that pay, stay, and refer. Most practices don't have a reliable or repeatable method for growing their practice in this manner. Some will have a few tactics, but very few will actually have it in their DNA. Now, my guest today, Rob Markey, lives and breathes customer loyalty. He's the author of a wonderful book called The Ultimate Question 2.0, and along with his co-author, Frederick Reichfeld, is the creator of the world-famous Net Promoter Score. And I'm incredibly excited to have a conversation with you today, Rob, about customer loyalty and how you've become so fascinated with that. And I'm curious to ask, what is it that has fascinated you about customer loyalty all this time?
You know, it's funny. It was like this confluence of things that came from the combination of my childhood and my early work experiences. My grandfather was what's called a provisioner. He sold meat to restaurants and hotels and conference facilities and things like that. And I learned quite a lot about business by watching him and understanding. And a business like that, there are only so many restaurants and hotels in a city, and meat is a commodity. So he actually developed a set of business rules for himself that were basically the fundamentals of customer loyalty. I didn't know that as I was watching him. But later, when I was in my first job out of university, had an experience where we were basically in a subscription business. We had basically been the first in the industry, so we had 90-ish% of the market. And suddenly we had a competitor, and we were losing market share month by month. And the churn in our customer base became fascinating to me, especially because my bosses were getting big bonuses for growing the business faster than the paper company that owned us. And that's not a high standard. It's like 2% a year. For that, we were growing like 20. And so I got fascinated by this puzzle about why is it that companies tend to treat their customers pretty poorly when it's very clear that financially it's in their best interest to earn their loyalty.
It's a really interesting topic, and you've spoken about subscription-based businesses, and I run a subscription-based business, so this is something that I think about routinely and regularly. Dental practices who are listening to this practice probably don't see themselves as a subscription-based business, but in actual fact, they absolutely are.
Yeah.
Totally a subscription-based business. And I guess what I wanted to ask you is, we hear about customer loyalty and sometimes it's conflated with customer satisfaction or customer service. And I wanted to actually see if we could get some nuance and understanding around those terms, because they're not the same. And I'd love to get your take on that, please.
I think it's really important. I'm glad you asked that, because to me, customer loyalty is something very specific, but in the world it gets used. The word loyalty gets used to mean a lot of things. Like
A lot.
You'll hear the airlines and retailers talk about their loyalty programs.
Yeah.
Those are not loyalty programs. Those are rewards programs. And
Yeah.
they're perfectly fine, and there's nothing wrong with them, but they aren't loyalty programs. Or you'll hear somebody say loyalty doesn't mean anything because customers want to try new products. In fact, there was a whole series of Harvard Business Review articles about this. And that is conflating repeat purchase with loyalty. In fact, some behavioral repeat purchase can be evidence of loyalty, and it can also just be evidence of a trapped, captive customer.
Yeah, and convenience.
So to me, when I say loyalty, what I mean is the emotional commitment that a customer has to a business's success because that business has made their life better. And they feel, therefore, connected to them. They feel like they want to see that business succeed because it is making their life better, and because they want their friends and their family members and colleagues to get the opportunity to have their lives made better too.
It's really interesting. And I wrote a book on customer retention, and the premise of the book was essentially that old adage that it's easier to keep a customer than it is to acquire one. But sitting behind that adage was customer retention through loyalty. And yes, we spoke about some of the tactics and the systems and how-tos in that book, but the big idea behind it was you wanted to earn the loyalty of your patient base. I wanted to talk about that again, just to kind of linger on this point a little bit longer, because your definition of loyalty is something I really resonate with. But just so that we can talk about the difference between satisfaction and loyalty, because again, I think that there is a difference. And again, if you could just give me your thoughts on what satisfaction means as compared to the definition of loyalty you've just given us.
I have a very simple mind, so I tend to break things into their most simple components so that I can understand them. And for me, the simplest way to describe satisfaction is a product or service that meets a fundamental need at a price that is reasonable relative to the alternatives you can get, right? So something I need that is at a reasonable price, that is delivered as expected.
Yeah.
As expected. And when something goes wrong, and something always goes wrong somewhere, there's a reasonable recovery. There's some sort of making it. If you do those three things, make sure that your service meets a basic need at a reasonable price, deliver as you promised and as customers expect, and make things right when things go wrong, you will have satisfied customers. Satisfaction like that there's nothing wrong with it. It's good.
Yeah.
It's good. It reduces churn. It increases retention. It's all good. But loyalty is something you earn on top of that. And I'm very specific about using that word earn, because loyalty is about trust that this organization is going to do things better than alternatives I can choose from. So it could be that it delivers the exact same service and product that competitors and other alternatives deliver much better. And the delivery method, the experience is amazing. Or it could be that it's delivering things that nobody else does that make your life better. So I'd say when the iPhone first came out, it was the first smartphone with a screen that really worked, right?
Yeah.
It was a combination of, it did the same things that other phones like it. This is 2007, right? There were phones that had screens like that, but it did it way better than those other ones. And it did things no other phones did. So it had the combination of two things that lifted it above all the others.
So it's really interesting we speak about that, because there is obviously a jump from satisfaction to loyalty, and you've articulated those two key pillars of what that jump involves. How many people actually make that jump, do you think? I guess what I'm trying to ask is how prevalent is customer loyalty, genuine customer loyalty in the marketplace today? How many businesses genuinely nail this?
Let me go one step further than I just did, though, because now I'm going to distinguish between loyalty and something else, even higher.
Awesome. Okay.
So there's loyalty, which is I personally am committed to this. And then there's advocacy. Advocacy is I'm willing to put my reputation on the line for this business. So not only am I personally loyal to them, and I would, if it's a restaurant, I would go out of my way to go to that restaurant. If it's a hotel, even though it's not convenient to where I'm going this time when I go to this city, I'm going to stay there again because I like it so much. That's me. Advocacy is, hey, Jesse, when you come to New York, I don't care where you're going in the city, stay in this hotel because it's amazing for these reasons. And then when you push back, I say, no, really, seriously, like I'm so, fired up about this place. You got to stay there. That's advocacy. And the reason I go to that level to try to talk about it is because I think that it's rare to achieve advocacy. It's not that rare to achieve loyalty, or not as rare.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some brands that consistently do it better than others and achieve that sort of emotional connection pretty systematically.
Yeah.
There's some brands that do it very occasionally. They get lucky. And there's some brands that seem like they do their best never to earn that.
Yes. I can reel off a few names off the top of my head, but I shan't, just for the sake of this podcast.
I have to be careful because I can't. I can't
Well, I know you're sitting there with the Bain and Company under your name on the screen as well. So I'm mindful of that as well. I wanted to ask then about that difference. And again, maybe we can focus on a couple of companies that do advocacy very well. I can think of a couple off the top of my head. But again, as I'm thinking of these names as they rattle through my brain, I'm also thinking of times when they've made some missteps as well. So I wanted to talk to you about companies that you observe that do advocacy really well, and equally how to stay on top of it.
Maybe 10 or 15 years ago, I did a lot of work in Australia. And at the time, I remember everybody talked about Woolies. They loved Woolies. And I'm not sure I know all the reasons why, because I never went. But it was fascinating to me to hear everybody talk about that. I'm curious, I'm going to turn this around on you. Like, A, is that still true? And B, why is it?
It's really an interesting thing. There's three major supermarkets in Australia. There's Coles, Woolworths, and Aldi, which is probably the third place one. Woolworths and Coles enjoy massive market dominance, but they use that market dominance to gouge at the present time, at least. And there's been a variety of governmental inquiries into pricing for supermarkets. And so I would say some of that gold dust may have been a little tarnished over the recent years. That said, you spoke a little bit about satisfaction, where you may have repeat business because a customer feels trapped. I suspect Woolworths and Coles both have their repeat business because of a lack of alternative options, really. Aldi is an option, but it doesn't have the same product range that Coles and Woolworths do. And then it comes back to, in Australia, we have a saying, do you prefer a Ford or a Holden? Or in your country, maybe a Ford or a Chevrolet or something like that.
Sure.
And some people tend to fall into either camp and always go there. But I can't think of many people, honestly, that would say, man, you've got to go to Woolies. They are the best. They are hands down going to look after you.
So what would be an example of a brand that every Australian would recognize as a beloved brand at the moment? Was it like there was a time when Virgin Australia was in that?
Virgin Australia certainly was up there as well, particularly in their early days in Australia.
Yeah.
I think in terms of brands that I resonate with, they're often not Australian brands. So the brand that comes to mind for me is Disney, where people will love Disney. But again, you've probably got a closer experience to Disney than I do. In Australia, I suppose there's a brand at the moment in beauty and makeup, and I know this brand because my daughter works there, called Mecca Cosmetica. And I don't know if you've come across them at all in your work, but they are making big waves. They've just partnered with the Australian Open. I read in the Financial Review yesterday, and they have a very strong following. So Mecca would be the brand that comes to mind for me.
Yeah, and so you ask yourself, what are they doing that's resonating? What is happening that they, because there's a zillion cosmetic brands.
There are. They're a retailer. It's really interesting because my daughter works there, and so I have a small insight into what they do. Their staff training is unbelievable. Their onboarding is first rate. Their staff are their biggest advocates. And so what's really interesting is that it's not just customer advocacy, it's team advocacy. And that was segueing into a question I wanted to ask you anyway, is what about the internal customer?
Well, I think that the starting point for me, I'll come back to something I said earlier. A business that earns its customers' loyalty is a business that makes its customers' lives better in a material way, right? And if you make your customers' lives so much better than maybe they expect or they can get it elsewhere, they're very happy to take money out of their pocket and give it to you so that they can enjoy that better life.
Yeah.
That same principle works with employees.
Yes.
If you put your employees in a position where they can make their customers' lives better and or where they can make their fellow employees' lives better, where they can serve them with excellence, you get an amazing boost of enthusiasm, energy, creativity from those employees. Because there's something really satisfying about making other people's lives better. It's very human. I mean, watch your children. There's also some things we all do as humans that aren't so nice, but there's this amazing intrinsic reward that people get from serving other people well.
Yes.
And I think when you talk about like the onboarding at your daughter's company, you talk about them training their people to serve their customers so well, what you're really saying is they have figured out a wonderful set of ways to put their employees in a position to succeed at making their customers' lives better. And sure, they carry great products. They must.
Yes.
Sure, they have reasonably good pricing, or at least relative to the value that they deliver. They must.
Yeah.
But the only way they can do that at scale over time, it consistently, is by having an employee base that is highly productive, highly engaged, energetic and creative about innovating and improving, so they stay ahead of competition. Yeah. And anybody who tells you that, oh, you know what, you can succeed despite having miserable employees is smoking something. I mean, you can for a little while, and sometimes you can for several years if you've got a genius at the helm. I don't know what it's like to work for, I don't know, Elon Musk, or what it used to be like to work for Steve Jobs. It's probably rough, but those guys are brilliant, and they overcome a lot of the abrasiveness with just their employees are in a position to make their customers' lives better because there's so much going on and there's so much energy going on. And people will stick with it for the mission, even if the day-to-day is a little miserable. You don't want to bet on that, but you can.
No. But do you think people like Elon Musk or Steve Jobs, and I have not met either of them, so I don't know, so I'm asking a question. Do you think people like Elon Musk and Steve Jobs are self-aware enough to know that they are difficult, abrasive, demanding human beings? And do they then put a buffer between them and the rest of the team so that there's a little bit of damage control that can occur before they say or do something that's intemperate?
I mean, they have to be a lot less intelligent than I think they are or were if they don't understand that. Yeah. Having said it, one of the reasons they are the way they are is because it worked for them. Very few people can get away with that.
Yes.
Right. So I'm a mere mortal. I have to temper my own abrasiveness in order to get the best out of people. And I can't get away with what one of those guys does. Okay.
Yeah. Fair enough. I want to shift to the Net Promoter Score if we can, because obviously that's something you created along with Fred. And I wanted to ask you about the background of that, because it is such a well-known tool. But equally, I think it might be misunderstood in some places as well. It seems oftentimes that it's simplified as a score out of 10, and if it's 8 or above, you're promoted. If it's less than 8, you're not. So I wondered if you could, A, give me a little bit of the thinking that led to the creation of it, and also, B, just take a moment to explain the nuances of the NPS so that some people who may be familiar, others may not be familiar with it, can just get a little bit of a working knowledge of it.
Well, let me first correct the record a little bit, which is I didn't create the score. In fact, I was an opponent. I was against the idea of this dramatically, radically simple score. I'll come back to that in a minute. What I contributed was the system of action that goes around that and that makes it useful for companies to learn and act on. And it's actually that's why I was wrong about the scores, because nobody at the time really understood the interplay of those two things. So the score is, like every score, a proxy. It's a simplification of a much more complicated thing. It is a way of getting customers to tell you, when you ask them, whether they would be likely to stay longer, buy more, tell their friends, be lower cost to serve, give you better price realization. And the way we do that is by asking one single question on a scale from 0 to 10. Now, that one question was chosen based on empirical research across lots of industries and across a lot of different cultures to figure out, if you were only going to ask one question to predict whether customers will stay longer, buy more, tell their friends, what question would that be? And that turns out to be, how likely would you be to recommend my product, my service, my company? The way that we got to promoter passive detractor was we were looking for something we could communicate to employees that made sense, that was simple. And what we found was that empirically, when you looked at those curves of retention, cross-sell, share of wallet, purchase velocity, average order value, all those things, there were some natural breakpoints in the data. You'd see that for 0 through 6, it was a reasonably flat curve. And then it started to tick up between 5, 6, 7. And so 7, 8 were actually pretty different in terms of their purchase frequency and so on. And then again, there was another tick up between 8 and 9 to 10. And so we just chose those natural breakpoints to say, well, the ones at the very top, they're significantly more valuable, and they are significantly more likely to stay with you and do all the good things that indicate that you really are earning their loyalty. The 7s and 8s are perfectly satisfied. Like they would give you on a 5-star or a 1 to 5 scale, or maybe even a 10-point scale of satisfaction. They'd be like way at the top because they're satisfied. And then the 0s through 6s, they're detractors. They tend to not do good stuff for you. The one that confuses everybody is the 7s and 8s because they're like, wait, 7, 8, that's really high. Why is that not a promoter? And like, well, because those are not people who will advocate for you. Those are not people who will stick with you even when the competitor is more convenient or even when the competitor is a lot less expensive. And by the way, when I say all these things, what I mean is statistically, over large populations, that's true. Yes. And the reason I say this, Jesse, especially for your audience, is if you're collecting feedback from your patients, from your customers, you're going to find outliers at every point. And there's going to be a tendency to say, it doesn't work because I found this guy. No, that's not the point. We're just looking for ways to sort of gauge the overall health of the customer base in terms of, are we satisfying them? And if we're satisfying them, are we earning their advocacy and loyalty? So that 0 to 10 rating of likelihood to recommend that doesn't still get you to a net promoter score. The way we got there was we were just trying to compare companies in the same industry on the ratings they got from their customers and say, how much of the variance in revenue growth rates could I explain with variations in their average likelihood to recommend score, 7.2 versus 9.1. And we could explain a fair amount. But one of the junior analysts on one of our teams said, hey, I got an idea. I think we could explain more of the variance if we recognize that the detractors actually are a drag on the business. Let's try and do some transformations on the data analytically to figure out how we could get a better fit with that line. And it turns out the simple subtraction of the detractors from the promoters, the percent of customers who are promoters minus the percent who are detractors, that net promoter score turned out to be a better explainer of variation in revenue growth. So that's the derivation.
Okay. There's a lot of nuance there. I have a question I just need to ask. It's rattling around my brain and I just need to get it off my chest. And it might be slightly left of center. For those that are promoters in the advocacy space, are they actively advocating for you, or do we need to ask them to advocate for us?
Depends. It depends.
Yeah, okay.
So some of them, so I would argue that there are very few who actively advocate for any business.
Yeah, that's my thought.
Especially businesses, like certain mundane businesses.
And I'll put a Democrat into that. Yeah, in some ways it's a grudge purchase for many people.
I mean, think about are you going to tell people about your auto insurance? Like, no. There's lots of things like that in life.
Yeah.
But advocacy to me is not just do you take action to recommend. It is when someone asks you, how fervent a fan are you? And how far are you willing to go to try to convince a reluctant friend to try this brand or service. In a business to business setting, there's a real important role that an advocate will play in defending a vendor choice against the purchasing or procurement team when they come in and try to say, well, we can get lower price from somebody else or from some other vendor who comes in with some whiz-bang thing. The advocates for that incumbent vendor will often surface and say, oh, hold on, let me explain to you why we want to stick with this guy.
Yeah. It's really interesting, Rob, because I have a 4-part process that we help dentists go through in terms of generating word of mouth referrals. And the first part is earn. So you've got to earn through the loyalty and the experience and so on.
Yeah.
Setting the scene, letting the customers know up front that advocacy is what we're actually aiming for. And down the track, we might ask for that. And then there's the third part, which is actually the process of asking for a referral or even a review or whatever it is, and then some form of recognition or reward for that desirous behavior. And so it just seems to fit in pretty neatly with what you're talking about there. And I wondered if you had any thoughts about that 4-step process, whether that makes sense to you from an NPS point of view or a customer loyalty point of view. Obviously, the earning part up front is the first domino that has to fall. Without that, nothing else matters. But I'm just curious about your thoughts.
Let me break the earn part into 2 components, maybe. There's earn trust, meaning this is so good, it's so consistent that I trust it. And if a friend asked, I'd be like, yeah, absolutely. There's a second part, which is give your customers something to tell their friends that is a reason to believe. Give them something remarkable, if you can. You can't always do that. But if somebody says, which dentist do you recommend? And you say, well, I recommend Jesse. They're going to be like, why? And you say, well, because Jesse's really consistent and blah, blah, blah. And they say, well, how's that any different from any other dentist? Well, let me tell you, Jesse's, I don't know, the chairs in his office are like heated and they're so nice. That may not actually be the thing that makes me go back. No. But you gave me something different something remarkable I could say to my friend to convince them.
Yeah, we always say that patients are going to leave with a story to tell, so you might as well choreograph the story that you want them to tell. And so if you don't choreograph it, if you don't design it, they're going to go away with the story that they come up with, or worse is a meh kind of story. It was, I'm satisfied. It was, I paid for it, I got what I paid for, and that was that.
So whether you like my haircut or not, it doesn't really matter. But I go to this barber who has an espresso machine in his place, and he's a reasonably low-priced barber. Like it's a little out of character for a place like this. And so I've never taken advantage of it. But when people ask me, where do you get your haircut or where should I get my haircut? I say, well, there's this place. It's a little hole in the wall, but they have an espresso machine and they're super nice and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
None of it actually has to do with how good the haircut is.
Well, isn't that interesting? That is interesting because the haircut is the haircut and it's what goes around the experience.
The haircut satisfies, right? The haircut is good enough and consistent enough to earn my trust.
Yes.
It's the other stuff that's remarkable enough to earn my recommendation.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you a little bit about pricing structure and as it relates to loyalty, because you spoke earlier about the need for a fair value exchange, or I'm perhaps putting words in your mouth, but that was my understanding. And I wanted to talk about where does price fit into, like, when you're building out your pricing structure and you're putting some thought into how you set your fees and adding the loyalty factor and combining those two things together, how do you think about price when you're building that structure, and then how do you relate that to loyalty?
Price is really challenging because price is doing multiple things at once.
Yeah.
Part of the way a customer evaluates price, is it fair? And fair has to do with, well, does it seem outrageous relative to the price for other things? Is the mechanism for exacting that price fair? Like, is it made up of penalty fees or nickel and diming or hidden things? Another part of price is a signal of quality.
100%.
And it
The
actually
positioning-
sets expectations in a way that you can either deliver against or not.
Yes.
So on the one hand, price can be a positive differentiator. Oh,
Yes.
they must be really good. They're expensive. But it
Yes.
can also set you up for failure.
Yes.
Well, for that price, I expect fill in the blank. And in
Yes.
fact, that's the problem, is that customers fill in the blanks themselves when you've set
Yes.
a really high price, and they become very demanding. So there's not a simple answer here, Jesse. It's actually this is why judgment is important.
Yes.
What I will say is the way that customers evaluate what the experience they had with you is a function of the expectations they brought into it and what you deliver against
Yes.
those expectations. And to the extent that you deliver greater value than the price they perceive, greater value than the price they paid, they will be really happy. They feel like they're getting a bonus. Just recognize value isn't all monetary,
No, absolutely not.
and price isn't entirely rational.
Yeah,
This is a
100%
long-winded way of not answering your question, by the way.
No, well, that's okay because it basically confirmed my own thinking. Price is a really interesting thing to think about. I think about pricing all the time in our practice. Positioning is really a big part of what we do with our pricing structure. But as you say, we have to have other signals around it as well. So in our practice, we have a premium price structure, but we'll serve our tea and coffee in Wedgwood fine bone china. And, that experience is not something that people would have elsewhere. And so we're trying to make sure that our experience matches the fee structure. But what I wanted to also ask you, and I'm just lingering on price for a minute and around expectations, is because I don't know if you've ever had the experience, Rob, where you go to a wonderful restaurant and you've gone in with a set of expectations that have easily been exceeded. And you think, oh my goodness me, this is amazing. I'm going to tell Rob that next time he comes to Australia, he's got to go to this restaurant. And then I go back the second time, the third time, but my expectations have been elevated based on those previous experiences. And now the gap between my expectations and delivery has narrowed somewhat. Is loyalty potentially compromised in that situation?
By the inconsistency?
No, but by my expectations being elevated. The experience is...
I see what you're saying. Yeah, of course. So this is a conundrum, especially in certain luxury categories. It's especially a big issue. So there's a little equation here, right? If advocacy is a function of the positive gap between your expectations and the price you paid,
Yeah.
then what are the determinants of expectations, right?
Yes.
Expectations are a function of what I think I can get from your competitors, the experiences I've had in the category previously, the experiences I've had with you previously, the promise you made, like all these things. To the extent that you dramatically over-deliver, you can find yourself in a bit of a trap where the next time the customer comes in, if you don't repeat that performance, they feel a little disappointed. Which puts you in this funny spot because I said, oh, you got to be remarkable.
Yes, exactly.
Well, here's the thing. Be remarkable over and above the promise, and be remarkable over and above what your customers can get from alternatives. If that's where you're operating, if that's where that over delivery is coming, then okay, maybe they're a little disappointed versus what you did for them the prior time, but you're still better than anybody else.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key thing here, is that you can't be piling differentiation on top of a core service delivery that is not good,
Yeah.
doesn't meet the competitive threshold. That just makes it really crazy. Like, oh God, they gave me these fancy candies as I walked out the door, but the meal was horrible.
Yeah. Yeah. It just doesn't make sense. Yeah. It's no value.
It's not a good look. So I think those moments of unexpected joy, the surprise and delight moments that people try to build in sometimes, those are fine as long as they're on top of something that is already really good.
Yeah, and that sometimes the surprise and delight becomes the expectation is where I'm getting to
Yeah.
is,
Okay. So take Disney,
yeah,
and you raised them earlier, right? One of the stories about Disney was, oh, my kids were so excited because they came back from a long day and the towels were folded into the shape of a animal,
or what, yeah,
right? Well, once that happens enough, then everybody's like, well, wait, what happened to my towel? Why wasn't my towel folded into the shape of an animal?
correct.
And that's actually the thing to think through is, do I want to do it occasionally as a way of surprising people, or do I want to do it enough that it becomes a core expectation? If I do it only occasionally, I'm probably going to stay out of trouble. 80% of the time, then the 20% of the time I don't deliver it, it's going to really be noticeable.
It's going to hurt. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I like that notion. There's a wonderful story, and I don't know who told it, so I don't know who to attribute it to, but they talk about if you're a gentleman and you have a wife, is it better to give your wife a dozen red roses in one go? Or is it better to distribute those roses once a month at unexpected times, different days of the week, different times of the day, and have 12 moments of surprise and delight? I can see you raising your eyebrows there, Rob. You're welcome.
Well, what about neither?
Yeah. Let's not go there. Let's not go there. But in any case, the same principle applies. A little bit, yeah, interspersed moments probably goes a bit further. So I'll perhaps leave that topic alone while I'm behind.
I think that this is a really good example. I actually like this. Should I give my wife a single rose every single day? Or should I surprise her with a dozen roses every now and then? And I know my answer, which is I don't want to be in a position where if I can't give her a rose on a given day, she's like, where's my rose?
yeah, yeah,
I'd rather be in a position where I surprise her with some roses. She's like, oh my God, that was so nice. I wasn't
yeah,
expecting that.
correct. Yeah, I love it. Anyway, I wonder if your wife's listening to this at some point. So hopefully we haven't given away the
Please no.
secret.
I'm counting on the fact that because you're in Australia.
Rob, I'm very mindful of the time. You've been very generous with your time with us today. I wanted to just finish up with, I suppose, a fairly broad question, coming back to the concept of loyalty. And as I said, I wrote a whole book on customer retention based on earning loyalty. I wanted to ask your thoughts about some practical or tactical things that kind of underpin loyalty in business that you might have seen that might have some transference. We've spoken a lot about exceeding expectations. We've spoken a lot about making sure that we are consistent in what we do. Are there any things that we've not spoken about that you think we should just serve up anything else that might add to customer loyalty for the practice owners listening today?
No, I actually think we covered a lot. I think that we probably only barely touched on the employee side of things. And when I think about dentistry, I think about all of the contact that a customer has with everybody but the dentist.
Yes.
And the percent of the image of the practice that is formed by people who are doing scheduling, billing, teeth cleaning,
Yes.
who knows what other things. And I would just underscore the importance of putting your staff in a position to make their customers' lives better every day and helping them understand what that means, what they can do, how they can do it, and then giving them the benefit of very fast feedback so that they can learn on their own what actions they take are more or less successful with those customers. Don't trust that if you just tell them what is expected and set them off to do it, that they're going to really understand what works and what doesn't work, or that their judgment is going to match the judgment of your patients or customers.
Yeah.
People need not only training, not only support, not only guidelines, but they need feedback and coaching that helps them improve. And I think if I look at doctors and dentists, very few of the ones I deal with get that.
Yeah. That's a really salutary lesson there. So, ladies and gents, if you've just tuned in right at the very end, I'm going to get you to go back and listen to that last minute or so over and over on repeat, because I think there's a whole bunch of stuff there that Rob shared that is going to be very useful in your day-to-day practice. Rob, I'm very conscious of time and I want to be respectful of yours. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us today about customer loyalty, what it actually means, how to improve it, and the benefits that it brings to any business, including a dental practice. So from all of us here, thank you so much, and hopefully we get to catch up another time soon.
My pleasure, Jesse.
Hey everyone, it's Jesse here. I hope you enjoyed that episode of the podcast. If you're looking for some more tools, some more insights, some more inspiration to help you create a practice that you love, as well as a life that you love, well, head across to savvydentist.com and check out all the goodies that we have there waiting for you right now.